Toy Story 2 is actually praised by critics and fans alike. Many people liked it and loved it even, and thought it was a worthy follow-up of the first Toy Story. What may surprise you is based on the story behind the making of the movie. That is pretty surprising that it ended up being as good as it was. So what happened? What were the struggles, and how did they come out on top with a great movie? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi guys, this is DPX, and I am the In-Depth Detective. Welcome to the show with the same name. Today we look at Toy Story 2, The Struggles You Never Knew. But before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and leave a comment, and you'll be a little subscriber. It was November 22nd, 1995, where a little film known as Toy Story was released in theaters. Many people look at it now and call it a classic, and it was rather revolutionary for its time. Toy Story was the first ever fully computer animated film to hit the theaters, and was the first film by Pixar. However, Toy Story was actually a huge gamble. Nothing quite like it had been done before. Luckily, critics praised the movie and was a risk that critically paid off. But how about financially, you're probably asking? Well, Toy Story made $373 million on a budget of only $30 million. Only a month after the first film debuted in theaters, however, John Lasseter, the director, and the higher-ups over at Pixar met with Disney to discuss the future and what was next for Toy Story. While Pixar wanted to go with a sequel when the first Toy Story was rather hot, Disney was having their own success from their first direct-to-video feature film, Aladdin: Return of Jafar. It made a lot of money, despite the overall quality of the movie. After that, other properties soon followed and started getting direct-to-video sequels to movies like The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Mulan, and so on. They were easier to make because they had smaller budgets. So therefore, Toy Story 2 was intended to just be a direct-to-video movie. Pixar still took on the task to make this movie despite being pretty deep into their new movie, A Bug's Life, then called Bugs. However, this ends up unpacking a whole lot more. In March of 1997, Disney announced that production on Toy Story 2 had officially started as a straight-to-video feature film. However, Pixar wasn't quite keen on the fact that the movie was going to be low budget. And I guess it kinda does make sense. The first Toy Story was a pioneer and was very revolutionary for being the first fully 3D computer animated feature-length film ever. And they thought that going with a lower budget would go against everything they've accomplished with the first Toy Story. Pixar wanted a certain level of quality to the movie, but that slowed down the production, and that didn't make Disney too happy. So what did they do? Well, Disney forced Pixar to remove Ralph Guggenheim, who was the producer and co-founder of Pixar. Shortly after that, Guggenheim left the company. Later on, Pixar had split into an A and B team, which made a lot of the employees not very happy. However, In November, Ed Catmull of Pixar actually asked an unthinkable question: if the movie can be moved to theaters. So what happened next? Surprisingly, Disney said yes to a theatrical release and soon announced Toy Story 2 as a theatrical film. However, something worse happened. 90% of the entire movie was gone. Nearly 2 years of work down the drain. The heads over at Pixar discussed amongst each other on what to do about this. And while it seemed like there was no hope, supervising technical director Galen Sussman went to see if she had the movie on her home computer, in which she thankfully did, and they only lost about a week of work, but it wouldn't stay for long. Pixar was then pushing for the movie to get delayed because there was still a lot of work to do. But the problem was that the movie was less than a year away from release. Soon after, Disney temporarily shut down the production of Toy Story 2 until Pixar was able to figure this all out. Time was ticking, so after many firings and replacements took place, the movie started over. Starting over meant literally starting a whole movie from scratch. Most of the characters and backgrounds were reanimated. It's worth noting that Pixar only had 9 months to do all this. So they reused a bunch of stuff from other movies. They reused a bunch of stuff from A Bug's Life, the first Toy Story, and even from some of their shorts. But to say they were working their asses off to get this movie at its release date as a quality film is an understatement. Many employees suffered from carpal tunnel, computer vision syndrome, and an extreme lack of sleep. One employee even accidentally left his toddler in the car instead of taking him to daycare under the extremely hot California sun, but thankfully everyone was okay. Some people even took as long as a year to recover. Somehow, someway, Toy Story 2, while barely doing so, made it out alive and met the finish line. And much to the, well, for lack of a better term, relief and surprise to Pixar, Disney, and the fans, Toy Story 2 came out on November 13th, 1999, and was a critical and financial success. Throughout the whole series, every movie I've covered that has a rocky cycle came out not so great, with the exception of probably the most recent episode about a movie I did, being the Sonic movie, and maybe a few others I'm not thinking of. This is the only one. And most people didn't even think that this movie really struggled to become a reality. But thankfully, it did. And many people love it. It's also worth noting that many of other Pixar movies went through trouble. Stuff like Ratatouille, Brave, The Good Dinosaur, Toy Story 4. There was even at one point still going to be a direct-to-video Toy Story movie, but that even got canceled. But other than that, everything else they've struggled with eventually came out. And despite what you may think about some of them, their track record is something to behold. And you might even have this movie to thank. So it's even crazy to think that Toy Story 2 was almost canceled. I want to ask you guys this question. Each episode, or almost each episode, I put a poll. So I want to hear your opinion. Do you think this was the movie that put Pixar on the map? Because while I see many people compare this to the other Toy Story movies, and It's probably the weakest one out of all of them, not to say it's bad, and I share that opinion. It may be the movie that got Pixar to really be confident in what they're doing. So, I want to hear your thoughts. Enter the poll. Anyways, that'll be it for this episode of The In-Depth Detective. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a fun one to make, especially since there aren't too many videos documenting the story behind Toy Story 2. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.